Thank you so much for joining us for our latest LinkedIn Live. A happy new year to everyone, and we hope everyone is keeping well. It's been a great journey speaking to my colleagues around the world on various future of work topics together with my colleague Pete Brown. Today, we're delighted to be joined by Christine Randazzo, who co-leads our global rewards and wellbeing offerings. So we're going to get into it straight away. It's comp season. We're in a great resignation, which also could be called the great reshuffle, the great reassessment. But Christine, the first question to you is, can companies really compete with rewards in today's tight talent markets?
Yeah. Well, Bhushan, I'm hearing every day from our clients when we ask them about what are their recruiting challenges. One of the first things that they're saying is that competitors are snagging people for significantly more pay. I think there's no way to get around that, and we can't overlook the value of a dollar, how important it is to people. Although I do really think about quite a bit in the long term, whether pay alone is enough to retain those folks. And I don't think it is. It's still very important, but you really need to be able to deliver the whole package to employees to create that longer term relationship.
And we see pay going up in many industries. We see here in the US, the wage per hour has gone up, but the real wage, if you actually adjust for inflation, has actually gone down. We see at the high end, it's comp season in banking, big bonuses potentially on the street. So we're seeing comp raises kind of in lots of different areas, but we're also kind of seeing that just being table stakes now. The pandemic has highlighted people want a lot more from their work and their vocation than just base pay.
No, I absolutely agree. And I think workers kind of have a sense now that they have a leg up here. I mean, everyone can open a newspaper every morning and see some article about this. I think there's more expectations of signing bonuses, et cetera. We've really seen a proliferation of that. But at the same time, we do have data that tells us very clearly that the relative value of base pay and bonus has gone down over the last 10 years. And that there are other things like work-life balance and holistic well-being benefits that are also very important to individuals.
Christine, I think you're right. And I think that the point you made there, workers hold all the cards at the moment. It is a buyer's market, so to speak. And I think it's interesting there. I mean, you're right in terms of the financial elements. I think, conversations, I'm having and other colleagues are as well with organisations is, I think there's a real challenge for employers to help employees understand the total value of their rewards, right? Because a lot of that is actually non-quantifiable in the traditional sense. A few years ago, you'd get your annual total reward statement. It was really straightforward, and you tot it all up, and you could see that. And now I think with the advent of organisations offering much greater flexibility around place of work, and also enabling people to optimise their work around holidays, those non-financial benefits, they're much harder to quantify. And to put that in a way that actually workers understand, something we know they value intrinsically, but you can't actually write it down in a numerical sense. So I think that's something that we're seeing play out at the moment. Organisations really trying to help get clarity around that and help their people understand that.
Yeah. It's interesting. I heard a client just the other day talking about the need to re-recruit their existing employees. And I just thought that was brilliant. I think it's never been so important for employers to take a step back and even beyond kind of traditional rewards, think about what is the value proposition, right? What is it that are going to keep our people here? What is it that get our people here in the first place? And then you got to communicate it again and again and again in a very crisp way, to kind of make that case. And that's stuff that you can't always put on a page with numbers, but it's so, so important.
Well, it goes beyond actually just the reward part. If you think, just the poll we ran before Christmas, right? I think we had something like 65,000 people respond, over 1 million impressions in 24 hours. Yeah, clearly pay came up as pay and reward came up as a key thing, but then there's all the other things, right, which are people are thinking about around things like empowerment. How do you measure that? If people want to be empowered, they want to play to their strengths. How do you measure that? How do you value that? organizations, helping people develop their skills, and all the whole thing around alignment of values, right? That all these things are important to workers. I think organizations are really grappling with how to succinctly express what that value proposition is in total to them.
So compensation's table stakes in today's talent markets. I think we've kind of ascertained that. I also would love to encourage everyone to kind of throw their questions in the comments on the live. We'll track those, and thanks for sending those in. I'd like to pick up your point around the power is now with the worker, Pete, because what's interesting is, for how long does that last? If you think about essential workers and the race to digitize work, there could be a risk that we digitize so much work and we're going to be kind of stuck with how do we reskill, how do we kind of tackle the blue collar worker? What are firms doing right now, Christine, in terms of incenting them to say, come here for a kind of fair pay and safety, but we'll invest in your future employability because we'll invest in skills development for you or other things around well-being. So I think that the power to the worker, it's much more nuanced, and it may change as firms continue to digitize.
Yeah. And I also think in this age where, let's face it, people don't stay at one company forever, one of the things that workers are evaluating whether or not they take a job is, what is this organization going to do for me to be to the next stepping stone, right? And, we've seen some very large companies in the US take major steps, even for hourly workers, that they are paying a significant or all of college tuition, right? Which is exactly what you're getting at, Bhushan. It's beyond the pay and benefits, what kind of skills and, funding are you going to give me to lead me to different career paths down the road?
Well, and I think just to add to that, Christine, right? And I think to your point there, how long will it last, Bhushan? I think who knows. I think the reality is everywhere around the world there is a critical skill shortage and talent gap, right? So it's not necessarily a battle; it's a war for talent that's going on, and we're seeing that play out day in day out all over the place. But I think actually, in terms of the reward, I think organisations start to see how can they quantify and describe that reward package in a way that enables them actually to access different pools of talent, and those different kind of workers. I think again historically reward has been quite a rigid thing. And I think now organisations are seeing actually they can be quite differentiated both within the organisation and within teams. The old days of paying actually slightly facetiously for attendance. Actually organisations now I think are valuing much more actually paying for performance, paying for outcomes, and actually recognising flexible delivery, right? I.e., this is the outcome they want, and how workers do that, as long as it's done in the right timescales. Frankly, do they care, right? They'll reward that outcome. So I do think this new environment, I think certainly accelerated through the pandemic, is enabling organisations to be not quite totally personalising, but I think it enables them to actually group segments of their workforce so they can be personalise the reward package to those needs.
Yeah.
So paying for outcomes, absolutely, for the value that people create. The other point you kind of mentioned was transparency. We live in a hyper-transparent world where whether it's CEO pay ratios, whether it's gender pay gaps, whether it's different aspects of kind of pay increases, everyone out there is being incredibly transparent right now. And so with that transparency comes great responsibility in that you may not like your pay equity data. You may not kind of like the pay ratio gaps and the inequity that you have if you're hiring a lot of people and paying market rates. And what does that do to kind of compression inside the firm? So big opportunities for kind of compensation leaders and managers to say, how do we get ahead of that? How do we kind of look at all of that data and really segment the organization? Christine, I know you do a lot of work in that space. Do you want to comment on that?
No, I think you're right, Bhushan. And we're even seeing increased regulation at a local level here in the US about different, transparency rules by state, which I think is creating a lot of complexity for employers. But, truth be told, there even lots of public forums, right, where employees can go to get this kind of data. So getting ahead of the curve, I think, is important. But I think it's not only transparency in kind of what you're currently paying, but I think it's also about transparency of process, right? How do companies make the decisions, right? What metrics are they targeting? What's the process? And then also transparency to individuals of what they're going to be measured on, right? What does determine their bonus? What specific behaviors are they going to need to show to get the total pay that they want? And that's also very important, and kind of a different lens on transparency as well.
Well, and if I may just add on to that, and then actually, Bhushan, there's a couple of questions that have come in. But that point about transparency, I mean, I think that really brings into a sharp focus the whole fairness debate, right? Mm-hmm. And clearly, for example, diversity is a key subset of that fairness topic, and actually brings into sharp focus the element of trust actually between employees and employers. As organisations are creating more flexibility, giving more choice. We've known that for all the research we've done over the years around reward, if people fundamentally feel they're being fairly rewarded, that's a good place to be. Where I think people get very frustrated is in this era of transparency is where there's a relativity gap, i.e. they perceive that somebody doing a similar job is they're being paid a different amount or getting additional rewards. So I think this transparency brings the fairness thing, and it's quite a complicated area for places to navigate.
And we've got to recognize that workers are very different in terms of their non-financial needs, in terms of how they work, schedules, safety, kind of needing to invest in reskilling. So the more firms can start to analyze that and to actually kind of give something back to the employees to say, you value this, we will take you on this journey to kind of build skills, manage your schedules, give you that foreign assignment once we start traveling again. And so people still might want that. And so I think that's the challenge, this segmentation that we're going to have to do.
Yeah.
Well, and as at that point around, giving people that individual choice, again, historically, I think organisations have kind of had a one-size-fits-all and made some assumptions around what they think their workforce value. What we're seeing actually across many organisations is the reality is very different. What organisations perceive their workforce different is often different to what they actually do when you ask them. And actually, I think you can get much more innovative and sustainable reward process as a result of that.
Yeah, no, Pete, that's an excellent point, because I do feel, employers have been so responsive during the pandemic, and rightfully so, right? We've seen such a huge uptake in employers offering mental health benefits, expanding their PTO policies, often, offering childcare benefits, but we still do see a disparity. And, despite all this, when you ask the employers, did you do a good job in responding to what your employees need? They say, absolutely, we did a great job. Then you ask employees about, well, is your employer doing what they need to really support your well-being? And the numbers plummet, right? They're like in the 30% range or below, right? And yeah. I really believe that what's driving some of that is the difference between kind of the formal programs and the behaviors that are actually embedded into the everyday workplace that make the difference. Yeah. So for example, we've been doing focus groups, for example, with employees, for employers that are really rethinking their reward strategy. Time off, huge concern, comes up again and again. But what we're really hearing from employees is not necessarily that they need more time, right? It's the frustration of not having the team support to be able to take the time that they're already entitled to. So I think employers need to be really careful about having the perception to employees that they're throwing a bunch of things against the wall, right? But if the employees don't really feel like their leaders are modeling the behaviors of, I'm taking time off because I know it's really important to re-energize, those programs are going to fall really flat.
Yeah. Hey, we've had a question from Yana, actually. If I may, throw this one to you, Christine. So the recent conference, it was presented that the future of reward will be focusing more on skills than on jobs. And that would obviously require different organized operation models. Are you seeing that?
Yeah, no, I do think that's a good point. And I think we've heard from a lot of clients too that career pathing seems to be an issue with many employees. Like they don't really know exactly what their future could be within their business. And I think that's, making employers really step back to say, do we really need to redefine what those career paths look like? because things are different. Not necessarily everyone wants to be a people manager, right? Or is there a role for independent contributors, for example?
And different businesses are at different stages there, Christine. So some fintech startup might actually say, we're just going to pay for hot skills. And whether they're employees or contingent workers, we want the best people for a period of time because we need to innovate, we need to IPO. Some other larger organizations may say our value proposition is that career path. And we've got to make sure that we're rewarding skills and not tenure. So that the complexity is now we're going to probably see many different business models. There is going to be different kind of rewards models out there, which means the tools and the compensation leaders and managers are going to really have to be kind of focused on those topics.
And just to add another bit of complexity, an observation from organisations I talk to colleagues. Again, traditionally, if you like, some grouped workers into domestic ones and then the expatriate ones. We're now in an era where kind of work from anywhere in some organisations. A blurring, if you like, between that distinction between the packages to attract expatriate talent to move around the world. Do you still need to have that differentiation? Do you see any changes in that?
Yeah, I think that's going to continue to evolve, Pete. I mean, I think it's a tough spot that employers are in, because I think there's even just this pressure overall, right, to offer flexible reward packages. And depending where you are, I think there are some hurdles to be doing that. But I think more and more employers are going to have to find ways to kind of let employees almost pick and choose the things that they want to, take advantage of in terms of specific types of rewards to kind of help bridge that gap.
Yeah. And we got to remember the economic environment we're in as we look at inflation, we look at rising costs, and we look at potential GDP declines in, say, Q3 next year. Firms are going to have to be really smart on how they kind of find the compensation and kind of, manage their costs so they can actually reward people, but also run other parts of their business in a much more productive, efficient way using technology. The challenge there, you've got to bring everyone along and make sure you're managing the inequity that we've talked about.
Yeah.
So Christine and Pete, as we look to wrap up, any kind of final takeaways from either of you? And again, going back to our exam question, can you compete on compensation alone?
I would say no. And I would also really encourage employers, the most important thing you can do is to listen to your employees to really understand what's important to them and important to different segments of your business, to be able to tailor, right, the non-financial rewards that are really going to make a difference.
Yeah. And I would just observe, I think, in the last 18 months or so, I think the value, what people value has fundamentally changed. Actually, beyond the base financial pay, but I think what is important to them has really come to the fore. And I think as organisations are responding to that and trying to be proactive, I don't think we'll really know whether it's worked or not until actually we're hopefully eventually out of lockdown around the world.
Yeah, it may take a couple of performance cycles also. So what I'm hearing is compensation's table stakes. It needs to be highly personalized. It's changing. Those non-financial benefits completely are so important. And trust and transparency are the core of both of those to kind of manage inequity. And watch this space, because this will evolve as kind of the economy evolves and business models. So thank you so much, Christine and Pete, for joining us today. Thank you so much to the audience joining and those listening in on the replay. We'll be joined again. We'll be having our next LinkedIn Live on February the 4th, where we're going to be very excited to unveil a new book that's been written by one of our colleagues, Matt Marnie. And so Matt Marnie, myself, and Nikki Wakefield will be discussing his new book on kind of digital transformation. So please join us there and have a great weekend. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.